Another bad builds a better something. I think it's what's called XABY. How could I forget this? Today we're doing the Minotaur. What is the Minotaur to me? Well, to me the Minotaur is an intellectual. You can read this if you like and just leave it at that. Let me just scroll through this so you can get it all soaked in. But if you want to stick around, you want to say hello and take a look, there you go. I don't like how this decided to shift that around. I specifically wrote those lines. The point is, to me, the Minotaur is the you know how there's always like that stereotype of like he's a big tall man and he's like all sitting there contemplating, thinking to himself. I like to take that to the Minotaur. The Minotaur is, because they live in mazes and they have so much time to themselves, why not take that forward and say, well, Minotaurs are quiet, calm, collected, they're intellectuals. They like mazes because they like thinking, and mazes are a great way to put your brain to work for a little bit. Man, it's nice outside. You should probably go for a walk. So, as such, I gave the Minotaur some boosts to their mental stats. Not charisma, because, it's more their mind that they're good with. I was going to some strength. I like the idea of them being strong. It doesn't have to be Constitution. It's just a little bit. This one's a bit weaker. But hey, you can get an advantage on an intelligence roll. That's really nice if you really want to be the smart guy on the team. Bada bing, bada boom, baby! You can give yourself an advantage and just keep that going. I don't know. I might do a short rest. It might be a bit better. Here you get to re-roll your spell damage, which I guess that one would be once per long rest. Because you effectively just get to re-roll all your damage dice on a critical and make it really count. Depending on how you handle criticals, of course. You might be the one that says, oh, you just do max damage and roll again. In which case, it's a little less effective, but whatever. Flash of speed is disengage and move action. Might just give all of them. Like, you can pick one per short rest. That'd be a bit more flexible. Like, a Minotaur is just all these things at once. It can be anything, really. You never know what he's going to do. Labyrinth Recall is, yeah, this is nice. I like the idea of them being very fast. They're also really tall. I mean, if something is 8 feet tall and it has like 300 pounds, I don't think that's actually that much for their size. Yeah, that's not that much. Now that I think about it, they've probably been at least 400 pounds. But they're large, they're tall, they're imposing. When you see a Minotaur, you're like, oh, shoo. And I guess they would let their intimidation naturally speak for themselves. They also have Labyrinth Recall. They always know where they've been. If you send a Minotaur out to the desert, they know exactly where they've been. It's almost a supernatural, magical ability to recall this. So if they're in a maze, they're never lost because they always know where they've been and where they're going. Unless the maze is magical. But even then, let's just change that a bit. Let's just give it a little tweak. I like the idea of they're immune to mazes. They are immune to a maze because they have this supernatural sense of awareness that just lets, like, it's, you know how birds can just sort of find their way south, and how cows are able to, are always like standing a certain way towards the sun. That's how sunflowers. That's just it. It's just a weird third sense in the back of their brains just evolved. They just have the sense. Just like your ability to know where sounds are coming from, or your ability to distinguish colors. Like, we assume them as, like, normal, but to other things, like, what you're seeing colors? You're seeing what? You mean gradients, right? Like, that's dark gray and that's dark gray. And it's like, that's blue, that's red. They can't tell. That's kind of what that third sense is, that innate ability to detect something that others cannot. And it's like, what do you mean you're lost? What? I imagine that to them, being lost is this weird concept. Like, if you saw someone, oh, goddammit, we're lost. He's like, what do you mean? Well, we came from there, and if we go left there, we'll go right there. We'll be right where we started out at. To them, the idea of being lost is how would they describe it? How would a Minotaur describe being lost, since they can't fully comprehend the idea? That's a good question to ask yourself, because it establishes some, like, how their culture would have formed. I imagine their cities would be very efficient, but kind of maze-like, because that's how they like it. It's like, hey, you get to go place and stimulate that nerve, which enjoys it. Maybe they enjoy being in mazes. It makes them happy. Similar to how humans love solving puzzles and such. In that case, if we're going to do that, we need to handle that a certain way. Well, let's focus on how they get lost. What do they think being lost is? They know that it'd be like, okay, you can't find your way to a certain location. But it's like, okay, you can't find your way where? Like, do you know where home is? Like, yes, I know where home is, but why do you not know how to go home then? It's more the question. Like, their question would be like more of, why would you not know where home is if you know where you are right now? You know, like you know where you are right now, you know where you're going. It's easy, just follow the paths. Maybe they're good with patterns because they have this network of like locations in their head. They're like, okay, if I go through Greenwood and then I go through the backwoods, I'll automatically come home. Like, they would take weird paths you don't understand because in their brain is this massive 2-scale map of where they've been. Like, they just have this network of this is where this place is, that's where that place is, so if I cut this line, I'll arrive there. Like, they make weird paths. They go weird directions. And you're like, where are you going? It's like, this is the most direct route there. And as such, they make great gnomes. They just do stuff. They have fey moods where they work on weird stuff. And because they're big and they're strong, so they can make big burly machines. I mean, sure, gnomes can work on tiny, intricate things, but sometimes you need something big. And sometimes big parts are just cheaper. Oh, the Great Horns. So the Great Horns are a thing from, I think, 3rd edition, or 3.5. One of them has the Great Horn, which is an Earth Elemental touched. I like the idea of Minotaurs are magically attuned enough that if you taint them with an Elemental Plane, or you give them a patron, they get, by default, different fur pattern and big horns. So Great Horns are seen as these massively powerful ones. Like, once they become powerful enough with magic, or they gain elemental status of some sorts, they become these much more potent beings. I like this idea. There we go. I like to imagine the Beetle's Plains because, you know, water's logical because it's a living thing, and Earth because it's a big burly dude. Moving on to the classes. What about the classes? Well, I got some obvious choice here. I got the fighter. The reason they're a fighter is they're good fighters. They like battlefields. Battlefields are large puzzles. They are pathing problems. But Minotaurs, due to their intelligence, as I mentioned up here, they believe that the best battles, the most intellectual battles, are won before they started. Also known as Sun Tzu's way of looking at things is a good battle is won before it's begun, in the sense that the best way to win a fight is to not have to fight in the first place, with plans that are not fighting. The fun thing is the Art of War was actually a criticism on war. It was like, here's how to avoid going to battle, which I find hilarious. But by the way, very clever. It's impressive that the man wrote that, because I've read through parts of it and it's like, wow, that's pretty cool. And it goes like, okay, your last resort is actually going to war, and your last resort is going to a siege, which is it's just read it once. Just get a good commentary book on it. It's amazing. It's good fun. I imagine they take that with them. Like, Minotaurs are analytical. And naturally, because they're analytical and they're strong, they're going to look at things and they're going to try and analyze them. They're going to sit there, and they're going to be mercenaries. Like, most of them go into battle because they have to, because they're big, they're strong, they're smart, they're good fighters. A Minotaur is going to kick people's asses because they're huge, and they kick people's butts. And thus, they're often hired as mercenaries, so they become mercenaries because they're kind of typecasted into it. But they don't mind, because a battlefield is also a puzzle. And if you're trying to manage, like, military logistics, hey, frick it, you got your captain who's kicking ass, and you got the guy doing logistics in the same pocket. Ain't that great? They also become wizards because they're smart. They have +2 to intelligence, which make them fantastic wizards. Well, what sets them apart a bit more is that Minotaurs, because they're so smart, and because they when they are wizards, I like to imagine that they don't just make spells, you know? They sit there and they go, okay, I have problem X. How do I solve problem X using spell Y? And they just make a spell. It's like, I like to imagine they made many spells that are practical nowadays, like Mage Hand. A freaking Minotaur invented because he didn't want to breach over every single time, because he wanted to sit there and work, so he made Mage Hand. Because that's what they are. They fill gaps. They fill logical gaps. Like, okay, we have these and these spells. Here's the middle ground. Why don't I make that and see what happens? You know? It's like they formulaically sort of develop the concept of magic. They're just rogues. Now, because they're cold and calculating and they're analytical, and they like to exploit weaknesses, of course they make great rogues. They've got the skill sets, they got the ability, they got the mindset for it. They're perfect rogues. Just the idea of, you see a Minotaur that's wearing roguish gear, like he's wearing light armor, he's got 2 daggers. You're going to go, that guy already knows how to kill me. I'm not going to approach him. When they mug you on the street, you bet your ass that there's already a guy with a knife to your throat, and the Minotaur's just like, just make this easy for everyone, okay? And of course, the whole "you're a charming rogue" works perfectly for them. Sure, they'll get charisma bonus, but hey, you can pull your weight anyway. Why are they clerics instead of warlocks? I like the idea that they think that because gods are powerful and know a lot of stuff, They're naturally more driven to gods, because gods are like, you follow these rules, you're fine. Patrons are like, you do this shit or I'll kill you. So there's a lot more inclination to follow gods, because, you know, gods are nice, and gods will grant you blessings and boons, and they'll grant you these powerful magical abilities, which they then study because they're fascinated by it. It's also because they have +1 wisdom. But the idea is great, of like, I follow this god because he grants me wisdom, because he grants me intelligence and insight into these situations, because he knows magic. That's kind of it. These Minotaurs are big, calm giants. They're very calm, because they know that if you show anger or anything, people tend to are tipped off. Like, if you're calm and you suddenly deck someone in the face, they're not going to see it coming. So, they maintain a calm exterior. Also, because they're huge, and people are afraid of them. People are afraid of these giant horned monsters with hooves. So, they act calm because they have to. Because if they don't, everyone gets pissed off at them. They're the first people to get their finger waggled at them. They probably build big houses. Like, their houses are pretty big. And everyone's like, why is this house so big? Well, because I live here. Minotaurs. I'm going to see what I'm going to do next, but I'm glad to get back into this, because it's fun. It's really fun to do this. It makes me think. But yeah, like, other races would look at them and go, man, you're freaking huge, man. Why are you so big? And they're like, I don't know. I don't know!